Okay, I'm going to call the Finance and Budget Committee to order. It's 5 o'clock. Commissioner or Chairman Frederickson and Commissioner Swartz, will you sit in until we have other people join us? Okay, we have a couple things on the agenda tonight, but we're going to move past the expenditure report and directly into communication number 2023-326. Danette Gleason, Finance and Budget Director, requesting the Council of Commissioners that the fiscal year 2024 preliminary budget will be referred to the Finance and Budget Committee for the July 12, 2023 Finance and Budget Committee meeting. I guess Director Gleason.
Thank you, Chairman Thatcher. As today we present to you the preliminary budget, I just wanted to kind of talk about the process that we went through of getting to where we present you with the budget here. We met with every single department head, director, manager, and we went through budgets and we asked them really to express their needs versus their wants in the budget this year. We knew that we were going to be seeing property taxes increase. We knew that there's going to be challenges in developing a budget and trying to keep the budget numbers as low as we possibly can while still being able to operate and maintain the needs of the community. And so with that, we developed a budget that is presented to you today. We have very few increase in staffing. Some of them are just kind of reallocation of people that are already in positions and the needs that went in there. So you're not going to see very many additional staff positions in there. But I'm going to turn this over to Danette, and then if you have any specific questions of me, I'm here to answer them. And I've again have to give a lot of credit not only to all the department heads, but to Danette and her staff, because we work diligently on getting here and the time and effort that's put into it by her staff. So.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher, Chairman, Finance and Budget Chairman Thatcher. Before you, you should have the summary sheet. That's about a 5 or 6 page document of the summary of the budget that's before you. You should have a staffing summary, salary benefit increase spreadsheet. You should have a longer 11 by 14 staffing FTE summary sheet. And then there's also on your desk, I don't know if you all have them in front of you, but a capital outlay summary request and approval sheet. Okay, so the fiscal year 2024 budget has been challenging. We've all been very much aware of the property tax scenario that we're all sitting under today. And just before we get started here, I want to let you know that this is going to be streamed right now. We had a lot of requests in our first public meeting on the property taxes to also have this budget presentation streamed. So Chief Executive Gallagher did state that it will be streamed, so just so everybody's aware. The fiscal year 2024 preliminary budget appropriations is $175 million compared to $173 million in fiscal year 23 for a total increase of $2 million, which is about a 1% increase. The amended budget for 2023, that should also include a number there, was upped by 1.74 throughout the budget year. So really we're way less than $1 million in an increase in this overall budget from our amended fiscal year 23 budget. The budget expenditures that are presented tonight, of course, are exclusive of our intergovernmental operating transfers, because those are just net ins and outs between funds. So those are exclusive of that. Like the 23 budget, capital expenditures remain the largest single expenditure type in 24. We still have a lot of the ARPA projects that are ongoing and will be ongoing and through probably the fall of 2026, as well as we have the large FLAP grant Roosevelt Drive project that was all $7.9 million federally funded, and then several other carryover capital projects that were budgeted last fiscal year, and as well as equipment that we had not received that are all carryover type funds. The total capital requests for 24 are 62.2 million compared to 62.5 million in 23. Like I'd mentioned, there's a detailed list in your summary sheet of some of those carryovers. We do have some new projects in the capital requests. The first one is, which we discussed even last week, was the $2.2 million to purchase the National Guard Armory Complex. I think we discussed earlier today in our staff meeting, we'll be coming up with some naming convention of that complex that is more relevant to Butte-Silver and the buildings and the structures that are there. We also have $1 million for two 26-passenger low-floor transit buses. The local match on those buses is $135,000, approximately $135,000. We also have over $1.8 million that will come into storm water improvements funded through reclamation funds. So in summary, some of the increases in 24 over 23 include salaries and benefits at an increase of 1.71 million. Again, that's detailed a little more for you on your sheet. You can kind of look at the different line items and how they're increasing. The budget does contain approximately a 4% increase across the board in salaries and $30 per month on health insurance contributions. Operation and maintenance and contracted service expenditures increased by $701,000. This includes $230,000 for a landscape restoration grant, so fuel reduction at Basin Creek, sorry. So a lot of these, the $701,000 increase are grant-funded dollars that are coming into us. We did see some increases in our chemical costs as Metro. You've seen those bid openings before you. And year over year, we've been doing operating transfers throughout the Metro department to cover those costs, and we no longer can sustain that, so we had to increase the budget for those chemical costs. We also have a $50,000 increase in the general fund for contracted plan review, so we can speed up the processes for plan reviews. That is fully funded by the billing and code fees, so not tax dollars again. And then $36,000 had to be increased in the coroner's budget. At the end of every fiscal year, we're struggling to find enough funding in the coroner's budget to cover the actual services. So a couple years ago, some of you commissioners probably very well recall that some of the laws changed and a lot more autopsies have to be conducted. And so we've seen some of that happen and occur in our community, very unfortunately, but it has occurred. And roughly we're on average short about $36,000. So that is a tax increase that had to be put into the budget. On the debt service side, we did have a decrease of $1.6 million. The decrease is attributed to the debt in the Ramsey Tiffin being fully extinguished. So when the sunset last July 1st, that was our last bond payments too as well. So that debt was fully extinguished. We will be issuing new debt, not on the backs of our taxpayers here, but as through, we've been talking about the SID improvements in the Homestake Meadows 2 subdivision. And so we will, throughout the next budget year, be issuing what's called SID bonds, and those bonds will be fully paid for and covered by the residents that are part of the Homeowners Association in Homestake Meadows 2. Economic developments and grants and donations increased by $1.5 million. The addition relates to additional Big Sky Trust grants that we've been very fortunate in our community development department to be getting throughout this last year, inclusive of one single $300,000 grant for Praxis. We do have in this budget grants and donations of $100,000 going out in ARPA funds to the Butte Rescue Mission. And then we have additional $600,000 increase in some other grants or loans through the URA department. Again, with the URA district and all the economic development districts, that can change. It's just fully based on what their property tax numbers come in and their certified values come in, and so they either can go up or down, but projections right now we're saying that they could potentially, with their cash flow that they have available, increase their grants and donations in URA by $600,000. We still have the other community grants and whatnot running through The ARPA funds, we will be reconciling those. We've just got some last payments. You will approve some final payments tonight, as well as some progress payments on those grant funding with Highland College and all those others that participated in the community grant funds. Again, we also will have furthermore capital, but we did decrease capital by $238,000, but there is that whole capital schedule, so as you know, there was increases and decreases, so I encourage you to go through that detailed capital schedule, and then if you have questions, reach out. The departments are probably the best contact person. They have their justifications that they can share with you, that they shared with the chief executive during, and my staff during the budget presentations, and they could better talk to you about why they had to have those capital crests before you. And then later in the discussion, I'll go through some summaries of some of the high-level capital that you'll find in the budget. The appropriations within the tax-supported funds is $66.8 million compared to $65.8 million in '23, an increase again of $1 million or less than 2%. The changes are as follows. We did have a higher, about average 6% increase in the salaries and benefits. I think that should raise a question that on average we were trying to do a 4% increase, but what happens in the tax supported funds, we have a lot of union contracts that have steps. So they're not just based on a flat 4% increase, but they also have steps within their contracts. The one in particular is the law enforcement. The detention center, the police officers, and the dispatchers have a step system. So it's not a flat 4% increase. They also have the step increase. So that's why if you're looking at our numbers, and I'm telling you 4%, but this is 6%, that's the significant element of that. Operating expenditures decreased by $147,000. Debt service decreased by $44,000. Economic developments and grants increased by $14,000. That's just merely carryover numbers. As we close out throughout the year or this fiscal year, you're going to see during our budget process, we're bringing amendments to you and changing those numbers. And capital outlay in the tax supported funds decreased by $697,000 or 5%. So in summary of the priorities initiatives, I'm not going to read all this in detail to you, but the local government continues to focus on a variety of different initiatives across all the many different departments that we have. The administration is working really hard on updating the strategic plan. We have had a couple different sessions on the strategic plan, and departments are working now on revamping their plans and how they could tie their plans into some goals and outcomes before you. We will hand this over to the commissioners. The commissioners will then have a chance to do some revisions or changes, and then eventually later in the summer or early fall, we can approve that strategic plan. But I just want to let you know that even though we're in the budget process, we do have elements of that strategic plan that we are working on today, and that's in that summary section below. So, for example, in the economic development section, we're still actively recruiting new entities. We know that. Before you is the tax abatement of a very large, significant entity that we're very glad that we've heard Karen and Kristen both discuss in depth about. They're also working on the expansion of the TED and the URA district, and then a creation of a new district in Montana Connection Park that will all be coming before this council. In housing, which is a big area right now that we're all focusing on, but we're in completion of a study, and we'll be presenting those findings on the infrastructure needs in the community and where it might be best fit to work on developing infrastructure for future growth. There'll be additional applications for funding in housing. Karen had mentioned today, Karen Burns in our staff meeting had mentioned today about a lot of significant grant writing they're doing in this area. And you'll be having some presentations and public hearings before you on that. We're identifying areas through infrastructure assessments like I had told you. Also identifying, like in the fire service study, for example, some of those areas we're going to come up with some other needs that might happen in or changes in our community. So those are also elements in a strategic plan that we're looking at. And we're also working on developing mechanisms to assist with affordable housing. I know Karen's partnering with a lot of community partners on this as well. There's a lot of different programs out there across the state. The chief executive, myself, we always get some emails sent to us, and some of them are in Karen and Community Development Department. There's programs that are being set up assisting for infrastructure for developers, or loan programs for certain levels of income, and there's just a lot of different things that are happening across the state in other communities, and we're trying to look at what's the best mechanisms that fit in our community. Under infrastructure, again, I just talked about the identification of needs and where growth is happening in our community, and where does it make more sense for infill of type growth and the most economical and fiscal responsible growth. We can continue to work on the ARPA grant funded projects, again, that will span many years right now. They're very large projects, and everybody's working super hard to get them done. The deadline is December 31st, 2024 to have all these projects under contract with contractors. Completion date is in December of 2026. We, as a group internally, have been setting a fall of 2026 deadline for completion of all these projects. Roughly $28 million is left in these projects. The work is being done on the FLAP grant at Roosevelt Drive. Mark has reported on that. Silver Lake EDA project is moving along very well. We have progress meetings with a large group. We had a kickoff meeting about a month ago that included the engineers as well as EDA officials, and then a lot of Butte-Silver Bow officials. We talked about the purchase of the National Guard Armory and how that's moving along for us. We will begin an assessment of government facilities. That includes all the buildings and facilities. We're not sure how that's going to work. We're still walking through that process and what that will look like, because we have a lot of buildings that need a lot of work. But John Sullivan, our building manager, who's sitting out here tonight, has brought the idea before the chief executive and the finance and budget department. He seems to be putting out a lot of fires instead of proactively doing things, and we're trying to change that, and we're just trying to figure out the mechanism to fund some of that original work to be done, and then present that to you throughout the next year. Road improvements, that's kind of a big item in this year's budget. There's an additional allocation of $1 million for roads. The total capital for road improvement is $3.5 million. That includes $1.8 million in the road department budget and $1.7 million in the BARSA funds. That's that additional House Bill 473 funding that we receive. And that we also have that $7.9 million coming in on the FLAP grant. So under the social and behavioral health side, which is forefront for a lot of communities, including ours, we continue to expand the various services for crisis response, case management, addiction, homelessness, and jail diversion programming. We have a lot of efforts, again, with our community development department, with Karen, we also have Shelley Cleverly, a wonderful grant writer that also has stepped in many facets in this area to help us out. And then the health department is jumping in as a partner to work with community partners on improving access for individuals in the various different services, and setting up a better foundation of how we can serve all these different elements that are happening to people and what's going on in their lives. We continued funding under the state crisis diversion, the HEART grant, the Montana Healthcare Foundation. Those grants are all in the FY 2024 budget. We did add $77,000 for additional service. That will continue to support the $300,000 in grant funding that we have. And then we'll get another $176,000. And then we also do spend the $176,000 to Action Inc. is also within this budget for those areas. We continued DUI and Veterans Court. We continued the federal drug court programming. Today was brought to my attention that there's a possibility in this budget that you have before you, there's no budget for the RSAT program that comes out of Judge Kruger's court, just the federal one that I just mentioned. But as of today, they're still investigating whether they want to continue that RSAT funding, but it's going to take some work on our part to make sure they have the right match dollars before we can say, yeah, go ahead and move forward with your continued use of those RSAT funds. Chief Executive Gallagher will probably talk about this position when we get into positions, but for now, just to let you know, we're using the marijuana local option tax, 77,000 of that for an additional adult misdemeanor probation officer. Additional programming will be developed to use the opioid settlement money. So right now in the budget, we do not have budget authority. It'll be happening throughout this budget process, or even potentially if we don't have a good handle on it, it will happen through a budget resolution or amendment process on the use of the opioid settlement funds that the county's been receiving. I'm not really comfortable. I have to work with the health department, and then there's like these regions that have been set up, and there's all these directives on how these funding can be used. So we really need to get a handle on that, and then also to maximize the dollars, right? We don't want to spend 20 or 30,000 if we can leverage it for another 60 or 70,000 and get 100. So that's what we're doing in the area of that funding. Additionally, the FY24 budget contains, again, like I said, the 100,000 for the Butte Rescue Mission from the ARPA funding. Under security and safety, it's also part of the equipment, but I wanted to pull this out for you. We're on the final phase of the public safety communications system modernization project that began back in 2019. We're on phase 3. This budget includes $400,000 of ARPA funding for, it's called the Public Safety Answering Point System. It helps us move more towards the next gen 911 system. And I believe Mr. Merfield's here somewhere. Could talk to that, as well as Lisa Carey. They can talk on that funding and how that will work and the importance of funding this project. The budget also includes $300,000 for a countywide phone system upgrade. We had this in the budget about 3 or 4 years ago, and it got dropped off last year. But our current phone system is no longer supported, and it really needs upgraded. There's also a lot of security and safety features that can be added in some of the new phone systems, and so we're really eager to get this placed in the budget and work on finally a new phone system throughout the whole, not just the courthouse, throughout the whole government. In buildings, we talked about the 2.2 million. There's 78,000 improvements. No, I should state, on some of these infrastructure items that I'm just talking about, these are not carryover items. These are just the new items. I'm not tonight going to go into the list of carryover items that we have. So that's why you're not seeing in buildings the restroom project, because that is a carryover item. These are new items that I thought we should be bringing to your attention more for this evening. So there's 78,000 in improvements to bathrooms for the original, for various events that are happening up there. We all know that's become a very hot spot for many, many events, and so there's a request for improvements up there. There's a roof replacement at the racetrack fire hall for $16,925, and then there's some south door work at the business development center for $16,000. Improvements other than buildings, again, we have that $1.8 million in the stormwater improvements for Holland and Alaska Street, and Eric Kassler and Mark Neary can give you a little more detailed information on those improvements, but it's kind of a multi-year. The dollars have been sitting there for a few years. They build up, and then we've done the analysis on it. There's sufficient funding, and then future ongoing funding that they could meet this $1.8 million. We talked about the additional $1 million in road improvements and the BARSA dollars. Those also $838,000 in water main renewals. $600,000 of that is the traditional amount of funding that comes through the rate base. And then there's $238,000 comes from the MR2 agreement that's still in effect. And then in sewer lines, we have roughly about $400,000 in improvements. Under equipment, again, the $1 million passenger buses, the $650,000 Vector truck for Metro is a replacement. That is a new item that's been added to your budget. You'll see in your other budget, there's also a camera van that's carryovered from the Metro department, which is separate from this Vector truck. And then there's $405,000 for the portable bleachers at the Civic Center. The chief executive's working to on that project as well. Probably will comment if you have questions on that as we go through the budget process here. The public safety is, again, one of the top items, the public safety communication project. And then we have $168,000 for patrol units for law enforcement. Another new item for law enforcement is $75,000 for electronic safety citation system. Some of that is subscription fees, but we wanted to lump it all together under here for you so you could see the total cost. $21,000 of that project will be funded through a J grant. So there's some other items on here that we're working on still in the budget, but there's $65,000 for an entry gate for the parking garage. So we have a kind of a multi-year project going on in the parking garage, so we're not positive that this will come to fruition, but we wanted this in the budget in case we could move forward with this project. But there's an entry gate and then a ticket booth that we're working on down there. And we're seeking URA funding for over a 2-year period for half of those projects. Then there's $57,000 for an electrician's van. I don't know if you've kind of seen some of the units that they drive around, but much needed. And then we don't have a lot of vehicles here. We have one $50,000 truck this year, and then a $48,000 painter's truck that's just a 2-wheel drive. So those are the high level. Like I said, there's many pages of lower level funding of like small tools and some other small equipment within those capital sheets that we can definitely go through throughout this budget process. On the staffing side, the salaries and benefits represent about 29% of the total budget. In the tax supported funds, that's about 50%. Typically, staffing represents about 35% of the overall budget, and then in the tax supported, it's anywhere from 60 to 65 up to as much as 75% of the budget. In this year, similar to last year, because of the high dollars in the ARPA grants, in our capital grants, that's pushing this number down. But we do focus a lot of time in our office, spending a lot of hours on staffing, making sure that we have all the different various elements of the 17 different union contracts and all the non-union people to try to budget as solid as we can on staffing. The non-union and union employees, like I mentioned, will look for a 4% increase on average and a $30 per month towards health insurance contributions. I just kind of want to direct your attention. I think you can read the rest of those summary numbers. I've given you them already. But if you go to the staffing sheet, you'll see the increases in staffing. I just want to walk through that spreadsheet with you. Overall, there's a 2.5 increase in FTEs. The first line item on that is a clerk 2 in the clerk and recorder's office. This is a part-time position. The total cost for that position, if this position was to take full benefits, would be $30,208. We load the full amount. We don't back off. So right now we pay about $19,800 for a similar position to a temporary agency for employment of this position so that we can keep up to date. Not only do they help during election time, but more so during our filing, our indexing and whatnot of our records so that we can keep up online with our records. The clerk and recorder's here tonight. She can answer any other questions of what this position does as well. Again, we have the one position that will be funded through the medical marijuana local option tax. That's a $75,000 position. That's an adult misdemeanor probation officer. And then split between two budgets is the service employee that does some work at the library, as well as does work throughout all the different various buildings for government buildings. And up to date, that position was either funded once we hit COVID, we've seen and needed that additional position, and that was brought on through CARES Act money in the beginning, and then shifted over to ARPA funding, and now is moving to a tax-supported position. So that is a new full FTE split. 0.25 by the library, so it's an addition into their staffing, and then 0.75 into government buildings to be used across the government. So in total, for those increases, tax-supported funds will increase just based on these dollars here. The $75,134, that's salaries and benefits. The marijuana local option tax dollars will cover the remaining $75,737. And then there's a position down below that is a change in a position and a change in structure. And I think that's probably better to let Chief Executive Gallagher jump in on that one.
Thanks, Danette. So, as you see, Danette does a fantastic job working with us together on everything that we do here. But the animal service manager, we're breaking off animal services from community enrichment. It's time. We have the personnel in place, and so this is a new position that we have the person already there, but we're allocating it differently and naming it differently. And so with this is Lynette Hogart that we're putting into the manager position. She was already there previously, but now the animal services will be a standalone position, and so she'll be working directly with me and reporting directly to me in this position. Again, knowing all the differences that we had within community enrichment and things that needed to be addressed, we thought this was a good move at this time to do that, and we had the personnel in place to take care of this. And so I know Danette's done a fantastic job of going through the whole budget, but I would entertain any questions. Are there some more things that we'd like to? Okay, we'll do revenue and then answer any questions that you may have with the positions and everything that we've gone through here. So.
So on the final page is revenue. So I think we all tend to focus heavily on expenditures and budgets and appropriations, but in our office, we look at revenues and cash flows. Because at the end of the day, we have to have the dollars coming in before the dollars can go out. So over the last few years, we've all known and been seeing predictions of recessions and tightened economies, and even our own, when we develop our own personal budgets, I think we see the squeeze a little bit and know it's tight. Well, that's not any different here in the local government. The squeeze is on, and the chief executive, I feel, helped us a long way in this budget by keeping it very minimal for any increases and trying to not impact any property tax owners or rate-based customers. So I can tell you today, I don't have a lot of knowledge or information from Department of Revenue. We've had one number given to us as a total evaluation, but it does not include centrally assessed, which is those entities like Northwestern Energy and our telecoms, like the Verizon Wirelesses or the railroads and whatnot that have a lot of weight in our community on our taxes. I don't have that number to work with. And then important to us is the newly taxable dollar number, because newly taxable for us allows us to either do some one-time capital money, or it allows us, more importantly, to take control, and hopefully in these type of climates we can offset any increases to property taxes, mainly the impacts to residential property tax, residential owners. So with that, there's a new laws were passed, and when we're going through the budget process, we're required by state law when we're presenting the first time preliminary budget to you that we have to give you projected increases for taxes. That's just the law. And then once we adopt the resolution for the budget resolution, there'll be a section in the budget resolution that states what the impact will be for residential customers within your community. So, not to alarm anybody, property tax revenue in Silver County, we're doing the best that we can to remain level for any property tax dollars. So the budget you have before you does not increase the overall approximately $32 million in property taxes that we need to support the $191 million, or what? Where are we today? $175 million budget. So we're still only looking at generating that amount of money. However, because of the way the property tax have been allocated out and proportionated out, we're trying to limit any impact to a certain class of property tax. So that would be like residential customers. The Department of Revenue presented at their public meeting a 57% increase across Silver County for residential property taxes. So property taxes are proportionate across all different values. So what that looks like then is if centrally assessed property taxes or industrial property taxes or commercial or agriculture. We have a little bit of agriculture in our community. If they don't go up a similar rate, then a different group of taxpayers picks up the difference. So even though we have no intentions of asking for additional bottom line overall tax dollars, we can't control how that goes across to the different property tax owners. We can try to minimize it, and we just came from my office looking at that, and what does that look like to try to minimize that. But tonight, I have to state that it is our intent to limit any tax increase for residential owners not to exceed 2%. Now, will that look like zero? We certainly hope so. Can I guarantee that tonight without any numbers in front of me? And then again, knowing that somebody's property taxes went up 30% and somebody's went up 90% or 100%. You know, this is all on average, so I can't control that either. So even though we might be able to limit to a zero increase and not have any increase at all, it could look different because, you know, Commissioner Shea, your taxes might have went up 28%, and then Commissioner Thatcher's went up, again, 90%. That's gonna look different, but all we're getting is the overall average. So that's all I can work with. So I just want you to know that we are doing our best. We spent a lot of hours looking at this. I've spent a lot of time trying to figure it out, but again, we just really need the information from Department of Revenue to get a better handle. But we do have to say tonight that some number out there, because I don't want to bind us by not being able to do something and then having to cut programs or cut services or make changes. So I'm, with a lot of caution, I'm saying it will not exceed 2%. I'm really working hard to be a flat number, and hopefully no increase. A 2% increase is on if a $100,000 house and it bumped up 50% in value to $157,000, it's $11 per $157,000 value. So not significant. I will tell you, and it is in our presentation, we have no control over the state mills. There's 102.5 state mills that we have no control over. And when I did the presentation, we were getting numbers from Department of Revenue of about a 30% increase. So with a 30% increase, that was roughly $42. So we have no control over them. So when you're visiting with your citizens and constituents and talking to them about budgets and talking to them, we don't have any control over those state mills. Their property taxes, most likely, because of the state mills, will go up because of that. However, the state has offered, and there is the property tax rebate of $675, up to $675, I think, that over a 2-year period, so for the next 2 years, that will be coming in to help relieve their increase and offset their increase. Also, we have no control over the school district. So the school district goes up or school district goes down, we don't have control over the number of mills that they levy as well. So this 2%, up to 2% that I'm talking about, is just the local government mills. And again, really our work is cut out for us. JP and myself have definitely committed to no increase. Definitely no increase on the amount of property revenue we're generating. Newly taxable is exclusive of this, but we still are working with the newly taxable to depress any increases that might take place. Also, we've had a lot of revenue. Certain elements of revenue come in that were over projections that will offset some of these additional costs. I will tell you that they offset one-time costs such as capital or one-time line item increases. You can't build them in the budget. But this last fiscal year, we worked really hard in our office with a lot of changes in investments on the market at 7 o'clock in the morning, trying to figure out what to do, and talking to a gentleman that we use as a broker. Again, we're very limited on our investments and what we can do through state statute, but we have earned about $3.3 million additional interest revenue over what our projection was. So that'll also help us offset some of these increases that are before you, and hopefully carry us another year. We'll see some of those interest. And on one hand, I like the high interest rates, but on the other hand, it's working with inflation, so our costs are going up. So it's trying to balance some of that out, but taking advantage of the fact that we're not issuing bonds right now for any large projects, and then taking advantage of the interest rates ourselves and using the state of Montana Board of Investments to invest in their STIP, as well as using some CDs and some other options that we have available to us. I think we can have another year that we have these interest earnings, and then hopefully the legislature meets in 2 years and fixes property tax. Currently, again, there's no increases and no projected increases for water, sewer, stormwater, landfill, solid waste, or the road maintenance district. So we have no intentions of any increases. Karen Hassler in my department, and then has worked with Angie Mulliken across the public works departments, and they've done pro forma statements, and we will not have increases in those enterprise funds. I do want to mention to you that we talked about the road maintenance district potentially moving from a per parcel to a per unit cost. That will shift the cost. Again, when the presentation came before you, we're not collecting really any more significant dollar amount, but the payers are going to look different, right? So the people that own the parcels that are vacant land right now won't pay anything, but the people that have a duplex and a fourplex and whatnot are going to pay more. So that's going to change on the tax statements. But again, not an increase by us, just an increase in how we decide to move forward with a shift on the per parcel to the per unit basis. So that's all we have tonight for you. Throughout the next month or so, we'll be going through presentations and having communications, and you're always welcome to set up. I do recommend setting up an appointment for me in my office, because my schedule already looks crazy, and I don't want you to waste your time coming up here and then me not being able to meet with you and give you the time that you deserve. So I will definitely meet with you. I can meet with you early in the morning and late at night too, after 5, if that works better for your schedules. So thank you.
So again, you see the benefit of having somebody that understands investments and keeping us in a great position. And Danette has done a fantastic job with that. So with that, we'll open up to any questions that you may have tonight about the budget that's been, the preliminary budget that was put in front of you, or if you have any questions of individual departments on any of the capital requests or anything like that. I did ask all of the directors, managers to come up here so that they're present, because we worked hard with all of them, and they worked hard to make sure that they presented, reasonable asks as we're bringing this budget forward. So, go ahead.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gallagher. Thank you, Director Gleason. 2 years in, and every year I think I get a little bit better at this, and I still know absolutely nothing. So thank you. I have a few questions, but I will let these guys go first, just so I can figure out my questions in my head. So, Commissioner Shea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is probably a real easy question for one of you to answer.
Okay.
The adult misdemeanor probation officer, the funding by medical marijuana local option tax funds, is there a separate pot of money for recreational marijuana local option tax? Is it all one? Is that just a?
That's all one. So that'll be the 3% out of the recreational or the medical. So that's that position that we talked about doing community service with and funding that.
Just to give you a little more information on that, we're getting about 82 to 83,000 a quarter on combined for both of the funding sources.
Okay, I was hoping there was another little pot somewhere, so to speak. Pardon the pun.
Commissioner Aaron, do you have a question or a few?
Thanks, Danette. Thanks, Chief Executive Gallagher. We've been working, for a while on the transformation of departments, both the community enrichment and the planning department. And basically, I believe that an employee has moved from one department to another in a transfer and all that. Do you consider the budgets for the community enrichment and the planning department complete as prepared?
Commissioner Reardon, yes, so we've made those adjustments in the prepared budget for you. The position that was moved from community enrichment up to the planning department, that we've adjusted those budgets to encompass both of those, the reduction out of community enrichment and the addition to the planning department.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Thatcher. On that note, that kind of leads into my question regarding the animal services manager. So it sounds like we're maybe taking animal services out of community enrichment and creating its own department. Yes. And then I have a follow-up.
Thank you, Chairman Thatcher and Commissioner Frederickson. So yes, that's exactly what we're doing. We're making it a standalone. It was previously, and at one time it was actually under Public Works. Then we took it out of Public Works, brought it into community enrichment, and then just kind of based on the knowledge that we have, we think that it works well as a standalone department. But I will say that there is a shared position through community enrichment, parking, and with animal services, and that's the clerk position that we have down in there that we'll share amongst all three of those.
Okay. Yeah, follow up? Yeah. Thank you. And then on that note, is that something that council has to approve, the breakaway of the department? I know we went through this with the reclamation department, and is that something that will need to come to council for a vote? Forgive me, I can't remember.
You know, yeah.
Oh, there she is.
We did talk about this, but I don't want to give you the wrong answer here.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Frederickson, I think that you may have to amend the Community Enrichment Department ordinance, because right now it has Animal Services as one of the divisions. So I think we probably want to introduce a new ordinance to create the Animal Services Department as a standalone department.
Okay.
And amend the current ordinance.
Now I'm starting to get, the wheels are turning in my head. And so we've recently, and it's been a while since I've read the community enrichment ordinance, but we recently took buildings out, as Commissioner Reardon alluded to. So would that be a good time to, is that within the ordinance? And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'm just trying to think of how we plan to do this.
So.
I just want to clarify, because I think Commissioner Reardon had the question about where the budgets are, and I think he might be thinking they're missing, and the dollars aren't missing. Oh, okay, because we did move from the community enrichment budget on page 49 in other purchase services. We left the $135,000 that has been traditionally budgeted in that budget for some of their work, because they still do the community enrichment and code enforcement work. We moved the other programming in code enforcement. So you're not finding it in planning budget, you're finding it in the code enforcement budget on page 63. As far as this is just going through the budget process, do we have to do this at the same time as we amend the ordinance? I would have to defer that to the county attorney.
So,
We
Commissioner
can
Frederickson.
talk about this
Yeah,
another time if
and it's okay.
we're
I would
starting to
just
run
like
out of time, so I
to address
apologize.
it just one sec. But we needed to build the position into this year's budget, so that's why it's there. And we wanted to start essentially as a manager, even if it's still technically under community enrichment, and then we can amend the ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. JP, I got a couple of questions. One's on the service employee for the library. What did they do prior? How were they doing it before this year?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Sorich, so we're doing that, but we were funding it out of the CARES Act money. So it's essentially just, this is becoming a permanent position that's no longer funded out of CARES Act money. And so now we're funding it a quarter. It's the same work that this position is doing. So they're working quarter time at the library and then 3/4 of time in government buildings.
One more question? Okay. One more question, Michelle. Okay, and just one more, then I seen the rescue mission, the rescue mission had asked for $250,000. They wanted to be in an annual.
Yeah.
So this is gonna be like just a one-time deal, a one-time, what you're thinking?
Commissioner Sorge, so what we went to on this is, I didn't feel comfortable with saying that we're going to fund this for the forever. If we're going to do that, I think we need to take it to the taxpayers. And so this was an opportunity, and I know that we have a ARPA committee, but under the timing that we had, we weren't able to do this. So I thought that bringing it to the commissioners can agree or disagree to doing this through this use of ARPA funding. But we did have, through those community grants that we put out there, we did have some of that funding left that I felt like we could use $100,000. I didn't know if placing $250,000, but I do think, it's a reasonable ask for them to ask the taxpayers. And so that's why we did it the way that we did as I proposed this budget.
Thank you, JP.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One more question, going back to the restructuring, which I think is a great idea. I assume that will basically change the org chart in such a way that whoever is the community enrichment director will not have as many direct or indirect reports, and so their level of responsibility will decrease.
So, Madam Chair, Commissioner Shea, that would be correct, so that they wouldn't have as many reports to the media director. So as we move and we have a retirement out of the community enrichment, that director position will, the responsibilities will be listed out as what that would entail. So we will reflect that when we hire that position again. And so on this, that direct report, once we do the reorg of this, will be a direct report to myself or the chief executive, whoever that will be. And then within the community enrichment, there's some reorganization I believe that we're talking about doing with the retirement there as well. And so those are yet to come, but there should be no financial impact to the reorganization of that, and including with the increase of animal services, how we're reorganizing that, so that there's no financial impact to the reorganization that we're looking at.
Follow up. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I would like to note that I would like that to be talked about with the consultants who are working on the pay plan.
Yes.
As far as reclassification, because it seems to me that with the decrease in responsibility, the wage would obviously not stay the same.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Shea, we'll do that, and we're talking about how we're meeting again with the reclassification with our directors, managers, and then coming to the commissioners, and then ultimately bringing forth to the commissioners after we go through that organization. But yes, your suggestion will be well taken.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is just a comment. I'm really happy to see that the Racetrack Volunteer Fire Department's getting a new roof. It's in dire need. You go down Grand Avenue, you can see it's about blowing off every time the wind blows. So it's really glad to see that's made it to the budget this year.
Thank you, Commissioner Sorge.
Commissioner Walker, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Couple questions. Thank you for the summary and whatnot. And I know how hard it is for you guys to put this together. Just on I think I'm saying it right, the RSAT funds that through Kruger's Court. So is that something that's just budgeted in still? The monies are still there, or it comes later?
So the drug court one is there. The federal drug court is there in the 2180 budget. The RSAT program is not there. When we were going through the budget process, they had conversations, mainly working back and forth with the state on how the programming and the in-kind match and the matches were working, and they weren't sure they were going to move forward with that budget and with that program. And as of just today, this morning, I got an email saying now they want to revisit it, the courts do. So we will work with them. Karen Hassler and myself did not have time today to sit with them and work through that. I did commit to working with them early next week, after Karen and I get a chance, maybe tomorrow, to kind of run through it and see what that match looks like. Over the years, just so you know, most of that budget was all in-kind match. So whether it was county attorney staff or some administration staff, or we gave them different spaces, whatever, it was an in-kind. We had detention center officers bringing them to court, or we had, then they used the therapist, would use some space that we had available. So it was all in-kind match. The Montana Board of Crime Control during this last fiscal year, the last 6 months, came back and they were identifying some of the in-kind match that was being used by the courts as not eligible, no longer eligible match dollars. So I think that made it a struggle for them. So now they're revisiting what that looks like. So I guess a long story short, it's not in the budget right now, but there's grant dollars. So remember now now we've given you the chief executive's budget. Now, anytime we make changes, we have to give you a revenue source for those changes, or else we cut expenditures because programs have completed more as we finish the fiscal year end. So with the RSAP budget, if we amend your budget, we're gonna have to come before you and say, here's the expenditures, here's the grant revenue, and if they need more dollars, we're gonna have to identify, if they need hard dollars, we're gonna have to identify where that's coming from for you. But that will show up on those big amendment sheets, and we'll walk through them.
Thank you.
Yeah. I really quickly, Madam Chair, can I talk about the staffing sheet? Because I should have added a little note on the bottom here for you that with that animal service manager position, Chief Executive Gallagher, through our discussions, he did mention he has no intentions for any change in structure to cause tax dollar increase or any increase. And so we should have noted that here. We put impact, but that's just today because we haven't presented the whole project to you or the whole restructure. I don't even know if he kind of has that solidified in his mind yet. So that should have been a note there that as of today it's that. However, the chief executive has no intention of a financial impact.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just it kind of goes with the budget, kind of not, I guess. So the sale of the Kelly mine, so it's sold in sold this year, or it's sold 2022?
Madam Chair, Commissioner O'Neill, we have not sold the Kelly as of yet. So we still have a tenant that's leasing space there. And right now, through talks with them, I'm not sure they're ready to purchase yet, but we do have to revisit the lease there because we will be out of there. Our Department of Reclamation Services, they'll be out of that building along with all of our other resources that we had stored in there. And their intent is to utilize more of that building. And if they're just going to stay in a lease with us, we will be revisiting that lease of how, the space that they'll be encompassing. Their intent, and has been throughout, is that they would like to purchase it, but I think with the economic climate, meaning interest rates, they're finding it harder to finance. And so they're kind of waiting to see on that, but we will revisit that lease.
Thank you. Just follow up on that. Okay, I guess that ends my other questions then. I'll ask that. I'll have a meeting and ask that so I can understand. I was thinking money into the county makes sense, and then we're purchasing other properties. So that'll be I'll sleep on that one. Thank you.
So, Madam Chair, Commissioner O'Neill, just to add though, that is the intentions. Whether it becomes an increased lease at the Kelly or a sale, those funds will go back to replenish the money that we've used to purchase, right? And I think that discussion even took place when we were going back a year ago and doing the buy-sell on the Armory, because the Armory buy-sell went before you almost a year ago. And so that went through there. I just want to point out too, in your budget on page 322, you're going to see a budget for, we called it, because we don't have the complex names yet, but we call it the Kelly / municipal facilities budget. that budget is not for maintenance and work at the Kelly. It's actually the utilities and the costs to run the armory, because now it becomes a community facility budget, much like the health department is a community facility budget, and everybody pays rent into that budget to cover the cost, including we will have the National Guard, the armory folks there, and you're gonna have agreement come before you, I believe, next week, that you're gonna see that they're gonna give us $3,000 a month for the O&M costs on that facility. And then the reclamation department will pay rent into that budget to cover their costs, and we'll get reimbursed for those rent costs through our agreements with ARCO. And then we also have Parks and Rec that will have to pay into that. And then any other department, as the armory leaves out and they turn over more properties to us, those departments will pay rent. So like at the health department building right now, we call it the health department, but it's community enrichment too. And so all those separate departments within the health department and community enrichment pay rent. That will operate just like the new facility at the armory.
Thank you for that explanation. Just that that's in my talks with, you know, people of our beautiful town. Thank you for that explanation. Just, I think I would have said it kind of like that, but definitely I won't repeat it back like you did. So I'm just going to call you, Danette, I think. Appreciate that. But definitely that makes me, again, thank you. One more follow-up and I'll leave it alone. I just want to talk about, and I didn't look at it in the budget at all, so I'm just, as I ask it for like jail staffing, and maybe this is something I can talk to the sheriff about, and police staffing. In the budget, is there, obviously we're down police, down jail staff. Is it in the budget, is it there more money in the budget obviously to hire more staff if needed? And also, is there any talks, and I'm pulling this right out, is to maybe give bonuses or try to maybe increase the price? I know we don't like increasing budgets, but to try to get more staff so we can be more safe, if you will.
Madam Chair, Commissioner O'Neill, so there is nothing in the budget to increase staff. I think we have adequate ability to staff within the budget that we have. It's a matter of getting it fully staffed, and that's where we're at there. Once we're fully staffed, we're able to operate at the capacity that it is supposed to. As far as bonuses and things like that, that's a tough subject. We're in negotiations with the Butte Protective Police Association, and so those are, you know, things that are brought up in negotiations and things like that, but nothing that I would really like to discuss in here until we have the negotiations with that union solidified.
So also, I should add, oh, Madam Chair, sorry. Correct me. To Commissioner Neal's point that I forgot to mention in the summary document, we're working through a transition period, and another contract you will probably soon be seeing become before you is that we are having very difficulty staffing our cooks in our detention center, and the turnover in the cooks has been significant to the point where we had an emergency and had to contract out with CCCS. Mike Thatcher came to the rescue again for us here in Butte, and we're able to serve meals to the detention center. So right now that is what is happening for us. So in your budget, you still see some line item increases for food at the detention center, and you see those, but we'll have to be most likely transferring those funds from the operating costs into a contract of service if we enter into a longer-term contract with CCCS to provide the meals at the detention center. I can tell you, from a cost analysis standpoint, the contract looks very good.
Thank you, Chair Thatcher. I'm going to go back to this Kelly Mine Yard lease that Commissioner O'Neill brought up. I think that, you know, when we were originally sold on purchasing the National Guard complex, it was said that we were gonna sell this and that was gonna make up for some of that cost. So I'm a little bit disappointed to hear now that our current tenant might not be able to do it. So I'm just gonna throw this out here as, I've never been interested in, my personal belief is that Butte-Silver both should not be landlords. And I think that if we're gonna look at that lease, we should honestly consider maybe putting it onto the market with someone that could purchase it, so then it can go back onto the tax rolls and people are paying property taxes and we're done with that building. But that's just my 2 cents on that.
Thank you, Commissioner Frederickson, and we will look at all options there
Yeah.
going forward.
And just a follow-up, I still think that purchasing the National Guard complex was a great idea, and I think you did a good job on that. So I don't want to say that we shouldn't do that. 'Cause
I
think we
appreciate
do.
that, and I'm going to throw out this one thing. We're looking at naming options, and I have some thoughts about that, of what that facility needs to be named as well. And so I think I'll be bringing some suggestions forward, and maybe offering, you guys could send me some suggestions as well.
One more time. Over the last year, we talked about a pay plan and basically implemented it. And I just wonder where we're at with that. Originally, when we talked about the pay plan, I believe all the commissioners were in agreement that basically for the, how should I say, the union members and somewhat all throughout Butte-Silver Bowl. But during that time, a couple departments expressed their concern about maintaining non-union workers, basically because of the wage and basically of the percentile that would be put at the 4% onto their wage. I was wondering where we're at with this pay plan, if we're going to address it to maintain. It costs money to hire and fire, and I think that this is something, you know, that we need to know what's going on, basically to maintain some good people, because we break in a lot of good people, and basically after a period of time, it's all about the dollar they leave. So I wonder if there's, what's going on with the pay plan. I wonder if there's anything in the budget that will address the situation. I mean, it affects everybody basically in this room. So I wonder if you have anything on that for us.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, and I kind of touched on this a little bit in the beginning. We are going to be revisiting, and we're asking all the directors, managers to come revisit the pay structure that we put out there, making sure that the job descriptions are reflective of the position, and so that they're going to come back together. We're also going to come back together with the commissioners, give a full report of where we're at with that, and then from there we will be bringing a presentation, hopefully in the fall sometime here, you know, as things evolve. The last thing we want to make sure that we are checking all the boxes, making sure that everybody is addressed, and that as we go forward, that it's a plan that everybody can stand behind. So we don't want to get in a rush, and I think that was part of the feedback that I got at the time that when they came and did their presentation, is we weren't ready yet, and that there needs to be more information provided. And so that's what we're doing, so we make sure that everybody has a really clear understanding when it's put in front of the commissioners to put that in there. Now, if we're able to do this mid-year, we have accounted for the potential of implementing the pay plan mid-year in there. So that is built into the budget as well.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, under appropriations, you said the operating expenditures decreased by 147,000. Why did they decrease? I mean, what changed in that?
Yeah. Of course, I don't have all my details, Madam Chair, Commissioner Sorge. That's in the tax-supported funds.
Yeah.
Overall, they increased, I think, 701,000 in all the funds. So in the tax-supported funds, there's many, even all funds. We see a lot of requests for one-time only increases. We have a very large spreadsheet that I can share with you, and you can see the changes, because this is a combination of many one-time increases last year that were taken away. I can tell you, for example, one would be some of the work that was done on the master plan. So that budget decreased in planning, because that they did progress on that, so there's only a certain amount of carryover on that budget, for example. I'm trying to think of some other one-time increases, but we have columns and rows of increases and decreases. It's a combination of a lot of different elements in those budgets, but that's one that I can just tell you, but because I was looking at that budget that comes off the top of my head. But I can definitely share that with the commissioners. I just don't want to bore you with pages of an Excel spreadsheet of what that looks like.
Madam Chair, I think that pretty much explains it. Just when you see a decrease, you kind of wonder, well, what changed? Why did it decrease? But I think that pretty well explains it.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Sorch, standing here just kind of trying to think of things to help you understand it a little bit too is, for example, like in the archives, there might have been a one-time, they do a 3-year contract on their HVAC system. So we pay 3 years up front, then the next year it goes away. So it increases, but can be offset by another increase, a one-time request increase in another budget line item.
Okay, this is just rolling. So with this CARES, because obviously CARES and ARPA funding, they're not going to last forever. So from my understanding, there is a deadline at which we need to have this money spent. Does that deadline include the December 24th to have under contract the fall of 26 for completion, or is that just for these projects, or when does the ARPA funding and the COVID or the CARES Act money need to be spent?
CARES Act will be gone. So CARES Act worked different than ARPA funding. We actually, just based on our reimbursement requests to them, met the obligations of the CARES Act dollars. So there wasn't like a timeline on the expenditures of that. The ARPA funding is very different. So the ARPA funding has a lot more guidelines and structure. The ARPA funding has to be under contract. So fully bid out, the projects have to be under contract by December 31st of 2024. They have to be fully completed so the Finance and Budget Department can report on them in their it's December 3rd. It's a weird date. It's not even the 30th. It's like a weird date in December. So we've given the fall of November, I think, 1 of December 2026. We've talked about that date for completion of all of those projects and all the funding.
And so all that money is going to be gone too by 26?
Yep.
Okay.
And it has to be, or we have to remit the funds back when we file our December report in December of 2026. We'll file that report in January of 2027. And if you don't have those funds fully expended, you are expected to remit your funds back. That's the way it's structured today. We all know that the federal government's been swinging on some of this money, but I've not seen anything on this. I mean, as a matter of fact, in some of the last budget bills, they were gonna claw back into ARPA funding if you didn't have it committed.
Just to follow up on that, Chair Thatcher. So there's a difference between committed and spending. It needs to be committed under contract by December, but it doesn't need to be, project doesn't need to be complete and spent out, correct?
So clarification, Madam Chair, Commissioner Frederickson, it has to be committed under contract December 31st, 2024. It has to be spent and the cash gone in November. We want it done in November, so our office has time to process and get it all completed. Or if the money's not going to get spent, the chief executive has time to maneuver and switch projects and spend the money so we're not remitting it back in January of 2026. It has to be spent, not just obligated, spent by the fall, by November, I would say. That's my deadline, 2026, 2026, or the money's gonna end up going back in January of 2027. I don't think we will have a problem on that. Public Works Director Neary has no problem. And just to add to that, we have not, we've been not committing all those funds because you've seen the bids that are coming in before you. We've seen some of those projects that we have all that money out there obligated, and we're very fortunate to get the state dollars on coming in at $500,000 more or $1 million more than what we had pre-engineering design work on, all because of what we're seeing today in the economy. And so hopefully we can get all that solidified as fast as we can, and we do meet every person in my department Karen Hassler, Danny McGee, Kate Woods, Angie Mullican, we've all taken a project, and we try to encourage the meetings and encourage the timeline and try to make sure that they know and are aware that certain dates have to be met so that this money can be fully spent on those projects. And then if any additional money is needed, we can grab it. Or the chief, if there is excess money, the chief executive and this council has time to really use the money responsibly if there is excess money, or if a project just can't get complete because it's way over budget. You're gonna have sufficient time to use the money wisely.
Thank you both. Okay, my next question is, so on page 4 of this thing that you gave us, and I could just be misunderstanding, which is most likely what's happening, but why under improvements other than buildings, so the 2023 BARSA funding for roads, that's what we received right now?
So, Madam Chair, yes, so that is like our allocation that comes out to us for project, yes.
Okay, so that's
So-
what I thought. So then just really quick, so then why under that 2023 BARSA funding for roads is $860,000 or whatever? And then on page 3, the total capital for road improvements included $1.7 million in BARSA funding. Where's the difference lie in that? What
Did-
is that?
On page, did I say BARSA money? Let me look. Oh, sorry, Commissioner, Madam Chair. That should not say BARSA money. Sorry.
What should that be? I thought it does come out
Oh,
of BARSA
no,
funding.
it is. So there's carryover projects that are taking place. Let me grab my budget.
Some of it's carryover from the previous year. So it's the Excel project where we have carryover of the BARSA funds to be able to complete that project. We put that. We could have.
So let me give you the whole breakdown of that 1.7, sorry.
Oh, I'm so confused.
Oh, did I label it wrong? So the BARSA 23 allocation is the 858 with the county match in there. We left the county match in there because during the budget process, the legislature was meeting, and then they determined now you don't match. But we left the match dollars in there because we'd already worked through that through the budget. So we left those dollars in there because that's the number that Public Works Director Neri and his staff were working on using for this year. The other projects that are carry forward, so if you went to 250, page 250 in your budget, you're gonna see the details, and you're gonna see that carry forward projects from the BARSA funding, there's 729,000 for Excelsior, and we still have about 170,000 left on Mercury Street in this fund.
Sorry, so then I still am really confused. So is the 858,000 a part of the 1.7 million, or is that in addition to the 1.7 million?
So if you look at that page 250, that's part of the 1.7. See, your total budget matches, the detail matches the total budget.
Next question's probably for you. Under equipment, the $405,000 portable bleacher at the Civic Center, we had that communication come to us and it had to be pulled. Within that communication though, some of that was in the letter was going to be covered by potentially the movie or the production. Is that still the case, or where are we at on that?
Madam Chair, that's a good question. So of that, we wanted to get under contract so that we can bid out these so that we make sure that we're not without bleachers at the Civic Center. We are in negotiations with, whatever street, but the 1923 production on what their reimbursement is going to be. It's gone back and forth. We're probably at least going to get half of that paid for by them. We're strongly negotiating for more during that time, but as everybody sees and all the questions about 1923, they haven't been ramping up. So I think this strike is really affecting their productions and things like that. So that may strain our position a little bit, but with that, we're going to continue to negotiate with them, but they've committed that they would pay for half, but I was positioning that we would like to have paid for more. But we needed to put in the budget so that we could order these pay for them, and then we'll reimburse back.
Perfect, thank you for that. Okay, on page 5, the $65,000 entry gate at the parking garage, you said it's a potential URA district funding thing, may not come to fruition. If it does, and the gate and the, what'd you say? Booth, yeah. If that does come to fruition, does that money, that just goes into parking, correct?
Madam Chair, yeah, that's correct. The money would go into parking.
Okay, I think this might, sorry.
Just to clarify. It does go back into parking, Madam Chair, but knowing that we're gonna have to increase the budget, which
Because
causes
of
some
the
right.
capital.
So if they don't fund it, then we're gonna have to be looking at some other funding sources. But, we're building it that way in the budget, but we can always take it back out if it doesn't work, too. So the money will be coming into the budget from like a transfer in from like the general fund, for now, until we can go to the URA board. The URA board has not, to my knowledge, I don't know where Karen's at. They have not even seen this request yet. We have to bring the whole project, to them, but, we did want to get this in the budget, so you had some ideas and had some time to think about how we're approaching the parking structure, the parking garage. And then there is work being done, on a ticket booth, and then as well as a gate, potentially, a gate.
Okay, thank you for that, and I swear I think this is my last one. On the staffing changes sheet, how is it calculated? So I can see where the marijuana local option tax covers the city court position, and you've stated that, that's great. How do we calculate the tax supported? Because I'm doing my math and I'm not getting that, so I don't know. So please, thank you.
There's your board head, Madam Chair. Just joking. Madam Chair, so if we I went through this pretty fast to try to get through everything, so we had some time for questions, but if you look at that clerk 2 position, you see the total cost is $30,208, but if you go all the way to the far right of the column, you see that the estimated costs that we're paying today that's already built in the budget is $19,860. That's been deducted from that because that's a cost that's already been included in the clerk and recorder's budget for some time. And so that offsets the total impact to the budget of the 75.
Okay, perfect, thank you. I don't have any more questions right now. Commissioner Sorich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I got a question in the capital outlay report for the animal control. For radios for these animal control officers, you got 2 radios at $6,000. Is that, I know, like the fire department radios and police department radios, they're about $6,000 a piece. And so are they going to be the same frequency, the same as everything is?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Sorich, so we were working with Department or Emergency Services with Mr. Merrifield down there. He was able to look into seeing what the costs of those are, and so we have a couple options, but we believe that the ones that we're able to purchase may be $1,700, so we may be able to actually get 3 of them that will be able to allow them to be on the frequency that needs to be there. The ones that we purchased as part of the whole project with Motorola, those were originally about $6,000. Now there are some kind of aftermarket ones that we think that we can use that I know that I think the Boulevard Fire Department purchased some of these and we're able to get them a little bit cheaper on some of the grant funding that they had, and that's what we're looking at as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a question for the parking garage. You say gate and booth or whatever. Does that, on the Galena part of that, does that include blocking that off as well, like a fence or something?
Madam Chair, Commissioner O'Neill, I believe so. I believe it's for a gate on both the bottom and the top that we're doing that. We're going to try to operate that where people have to stop at a gate, either have a ticket, whether they purchase it on a pass type system. We're looking at all the options there, but also there'll be a gate down below as well.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Last one. Can you just explain these SID bonds? So as far as the Homestake Meadows thing, that comes to council, we approve the homeowner association or however that works. Yeah, maybe. The funding then goes where?
Madam Chair, so SID bonds are a little different, kind of instrument. The county does issue them, so we take on the responsibility of saying we will place them on the tax bill. So we go through the whole documents. Many of you probably have not been on the council when we've issued any bonds. So there's a lot of bond documents that come before you that you will approve through resolution. The homeowners association will be contracting and working with Dorsey and Whitney. I know that. I have spoken to Dan Villa on that. And so the county attorney and myself will be sitting down for a meeting later this month, probably even as early as next week, to meet with Dorsey and Whitney and start the process with them. So you set up a bond sinking fund, because not right, you don't get 100% tax collections, but the county's paying the bonds. So when you do these, you set up a bond sinking fund in SIDs, which are similar to reserve funds. And so then that fund can be used and drawn upon if anybody's late with their taxes, and we still have to make a bond payment for them on July 1 and January 1. So in those bond documents, you'll see that we have to set up that fund. Then we will, once the construction's complete, we will place that on their tax statement, and I believe they're going a 10-year I think he had mentioned a 10-year on there. And so over a course of 10 years, that SID will be placed on their taxes. Then as new parcels come in out there, they're doing it, as my understanding, per parcel, not square footage. So they're doing per parcel. So I don't know how many parcels are left to be added on out there, or if they expand the district, because SID districts can be expanded too. I don't know what that looks like, or their intention is there. But I think they're pretty much all filled up anyways out there. But that will be on their tax bill every single year for 10 years. And, you know, we did remind them, and we did remind the homeowners association, when you do this, you need to really talk to your people, because it can be significant, right? When you're doing a big paving project like that, it can be significant for each one of the homeowners. And it's not the chief executive, and it's not this council putting that on their tax bill. They're doing that to themselves.
Tonight, and thank you to all you guys for being here as well. Does anybody else have any further questions for Director Gleason, Chief Executive Gallagher, anybody else out there? Commissioner O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Danette, you kind of committing to 2026, it appears, to follow the ARPA funds, because to make sure, that's what I heard. I don't know if everybody heard that. So at least we know we have Danette till November of 26 or whatever that was, so you'd follow the funds. So it's exciting to hear that.
Commissioner O'Neill will make sure we are not sending any money back to the federal government on money that is given to the local government.
Anybody else? Comments, questions? Okay, well, I think that does it. Like I said, I appreciate all of you guys. I appreciate your office, your work. Karen, Danny, Kate, all you guys in there. So thank you very much. I think that probably concludes this part of the meeting, and we'll meet on the expenditure list.